"You're worthless," my son said, and kicked me out. 48 hours later, I sold his $8 company. I still remember the moment my own son looked me in the eyes and said the words no parent should ever hear. "You're worthless, Dad." He didn't shout. He didn't even tremble. He just said it like it was a business decision he had already finalized in his mind. Then he pointed toward the door of the house I had bought, furnished, and built a life in for more than 30 years. "Pack your things." I stood there, holding the same coffee mug I used every morning, the same mug he made for me when he was 9 years old during a school crafts project. "World's best dad," it said in fading blue paint. Funny how things lose their meaning when hearts change. For a moment, I didn't speak. I didn't beg or argue. I didn't even ask him why. There are times in life when silence tells you more than words. I just nodded. My son, Michael, had grown cold toward me over the past few years. Success had changed him. Money had sharpened him. Pride had blinded him. But I never imagined he'd go this far. I walked out of the house with a small duffel bag and the clothes on my back. He didn't even open the door for me. He watched me from the kitchen window as if I were a stranger trespassing on his property. And yet, I wasn't angry. Not even then, because deep down, there was something I had kept from him for years. Something that would change everything he thought he understood about power, ownership, and legacy. He thought he owned his success. He thought he built his empire alone. He thought he didn't need me anymore. He had no idea that the ground he was standing on was mine, and in 48 hours he would learn what happens when someone mistakes quiet love for weakness. My name is David Reed, and I spent 35 years working in product development. I never became a millionaire, but I lived comfortably, raised my son as a single parent, and always tried to teach him the value of humility. When Michael was a teenager, he was bright, determined, and endlessly curious. He used to sit at my desk for hours asking questions about my work, how patents worked, how products were designed, how companies made decisions. I encouraged his curiosity. I mentored him. I even helped him start his first small business when he was only 19, a simple online service that later grew into a software company. But as the company expanded and investors came in, my role faded in the background. I didn't mind. That's how life works. Children grow. They take the lead. Parents step back, or at least that's how it's supposed to be. Somewhere along the way, though, Michael changed. He hired new managers, new advisors, new investors. I became, in his eyes, unnecessary. But what he didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that when he started his company, the legal paperwork wasn't in his name alone. I had registered the business under both our names, not because I wanted control, but because I wanted him protected in case anything ever went wrong. My half of the company sat quietly there for years, untouched, unnoticed, forgotten, until the day he told me I was worthless and pushed me out of his life. After Michael kicked me out, I stayed at an old friend's place. I slept on a narrow guest bed, stared at the ceiling for hours, and wondered how a heart could twist so far away from its roots. The next morning, I received an email from the company's legal department, termination of advisory role, effective immediately. They didn't even bother calling me. Just a cold document removing me from the board, erasing me from the website, and shutting down the company email I barely used. Then, 20 minutes later, a second email. Request for transfer of ownership. Goodwill. That word almost made me smile. They thought I would sign without reading. They assumed I would crumble. They assumed I would accept my irrelevance. I didn't reply. Instead, I called an old lawyer friend of mine, Henry Wallace. We had worked together in my early career. Henry had retired, but he still enjoyed a good puzzle. He doesn't, I replied quietly. Henry spent the afternoon going through every original filing, every clause, every amendment. My ownership was legally airtight, 50%, half of everything, half of the profit, half of the assets, half of the intellectual property, and yes, half of the authority to sell. Michael didn't know what he was touching when he pushed me out. He didn't check, he didn't think, he believed he was untouchable. But arrogance clouds judgment, and judgment controls destiny. That evening, Henry called again. "David," he said in a slow, thoughtful tone, "your son's company has just received an acquisition offer, a big one." I asked. I didn't answer right away. I sat down, feeling a strange calm settle inside me. Not joy, not vengeance, just clarity. Michael had been ignoring the emails, assuming he didn't need my approval. In 48 hours, the buyers would pull out, and the offer, his golden ticket, would evaporate. Silence, I realized, had its own kind of power. The next morning, Michael finally called me, the first call since kicking me out. "Dad," he said sharply, "I need you to sign something." I didn't answer right away. I let him sit in the silence for a moment. "It's just paperwork, routine stuff," I repeated calmly. There was a pause. He asked, his voice suddenly less confident. He exhaled sharply, annoyed but trying to hide panic. "Dad, listen, we need your signature, okay?" I asked gently. "Dad," he snapped, "don't start this." But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lecture him. I didn't remind him of what he had done. 2 hours later, Michael walked into Henry's law firm with tight shoulders and trembling fingers. He avoided my eyes. He slid the documents across the table. "Just sign," he muttered. Henry cleared his throat. "Michael, your father owns 50% of the company." Michael froze. Henry asked mildly. My son's jaw slowly fell open. Confusion, disbelief, then fear moved across his face. "Yes," I said quietly. "I protected the company when you were too young to understand contracts." He looked at me as if seeing a stranger. "Because you never asked," I replied. He swallowed hard. I could see the panic rising behind his eyes. "Dad, the buyers need your signature today. If the deal falls through, we're finished." I looked at him gently. "You built the company so fast, but you didn't build it wisely. You expanded too quickly. You borrowed too much." His breathing quickened. "Dad, please," he whispered. For the first time in years, he wasn't speaking as a CEO. He was speaking as my son. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't make demands. I didn't scold him. I simply stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the street. He sagged with relief. He looked up, startled. "I'm signing the acquisition agreement," I continued. His face turned pale. You're selling?" "Yes," I said softly. "And because I own half, the buyer gets full control." He stumbled back into the chair. I turned toward him, calm as a quiet morning. "No, Michael." The sale went through later that afternoon. $8 million, $4 million to me, $4 million to Michael, but Michael's share came with strings attached. The buyer required him to step down as CEO due to misuse of funds. I didn't negotiate that term. The buyer did their due diligence. Sometimes life handles the justice for you. When it was all done, Michael sat in the empty office that once buzzed with energy and hope. He looked lost, defeated, small, not the confident entrepreneur he used to pretend to be. He asked quietly. I sat beside him, not triumphantly, not proudly, just thoughtfully. "You rebuild," I said. He wiped his eyes. I had not seen him cry since his mother passed years ago. "I messed up," he whispered. "Yes," I said gently. He looked at me for a long moment. I shook my head. "No, son, I did this to protect what you built. You were driving a car too fast toward a cliff." He looked down. "That's what pride does," I replied. Michael nodded slowly. We sat in silence for a while, two men who once stood on opposite sides of a broken bridge, now finally meeting in the middle. I didn't ask him to change. I didn't ask him to repay me. I didn't ask him to love me more. All I asked was this: learn from this. He nodded again, and this time I saw something new in his eyes, not fear, not anger, reflection. I used my share of the money to buy a small cabin near the countryside, a quiet place with tall trees, soft morning light, and a porch where I could drink coffee without rush or noise. Michael visits me often now. He asks for advice, not because he needs it, but because he finally understands its value. He started a new project, smaller this time, wiser, slower. He keeps me updated every week. We're both learning. He's learning respect. I'm learning acceptance. Sometimes people must fall to see the ground beneath them. Sometimes relationships must break before they can be rebuilt stronger. Did I take revenge? Not in the way most people think. I didn't plot, I didn't shout, I didn't destroy anything. I simply let the truth do the work. My calm was my strategy, my silence was my strength, my patience was my justice, and my son learned the lesson he needed, not the one he wanted.